Starting off Thursday was just a race with absolutely no pace in here, and I handicapped it still as one that was going to run from off the pace. I ended up having the 5 as the pace setter, and we go all the way down here December 21st, 2022 at Turfway Park. $30,000 maiden claiming race. Was in first, embattled at the second call and the stretch call in here, but essentially on the pace all the way throughout. 22 and 3/5 seconds, 45 and 3/5 seconds to the second call. That was sort of the mark I was looking for in here. And when we got to the 3, you can see 2 races back at Monmouth, 22 and 2/5, 45 and 3/5 the second call. At that second call, he was in first by a head and drew off to win. And I wanted to use that second call time as the mark to see if the rest of these off the pace runners can run winning races against. The one you can see was an A horse for me, and the reason why was last time out. 45 and 3/5 seconds, made a good positional move and into the beaten lanes before drawing off to win that by 4 1/4 lengths. Now, obviously, big step up in class from $50,000 maiden claimers and $50,000 claimers, now winners of 2. But, we can see he can get to that mark. Logical horse in here and ended up going off at even odds. The 2 was a horse that I thought had the most upside in here of these runners. And when you look at the second race, 45 and 2/5 seconds, makes a move in here positionally, loses a 1/4 length, but just kind of stays on and keeps passing horses that were probably tiring in here for second. Comes in with 2 good races. I thought the form was excellent, and honestly, this race was so weak. Even though he hasn't won at this allowance level, I thought this was a race that, maybe he could steal, and especially going off at 14-1. I thought there was plenty of upside in there on him. He was another A horse. And then I ended up having the 3 in here as a B. Reason why, I knew he was going to take some money. Didn't expect 7-2. I thought that morning line would probably stick with all the money coming in on the 1. But the presence of the 5, who was a toss for me in here but ended up winning the race, I thought had no hope. The 4 was a pretty quick toss. You see 45 and 4/5 seconds, $50,000 maiden claimer last time out. Really, that's the only race he's ran in here that's been good. I think what's interesting, though, is if you eliminate all these routes in here and you look at his 2 sprint races, he came in 3rd. And he came in first. He could be a sneaky one, just not quite up to par with the rest of these runners in here today. And then the 5, I ended up tossing this 5. And the reason why, he was coming in off of all these route races, cutting back into a sprint. Usually that's bad for horses. The way I've always gone about it is that races are run differently by distance. And these, route races, they're not as fast early. My thought was he's an early runner. He gets out to the front, but he's just going to tee it up for the off-the-pace runners. Obviously, it wasn't true. Went off at 3-1 to win this race. And then lastly, the 6, you can look at his last 2 races. 46 seconds to the second call. 47 and 3/5 was in the win last time out against $50,000 claimers, now winners of 2. Stepping up in class. I wanted nothing to do with him. The pace is going to be much swifter. And if you're thinking, well, 3 back he ran against 45 and 1/5, you can see that was a -1. Barely gets up to win that race. That pace is a little bit quicker from a raw figure compared to what it truly is. He went off at 7-1 and was a toss in here. Look, obviously I'm sure you know where I was going. 1 and 2, I Dutch bet him. Even odds and 14-1. The 5 ends up winning this race, but it was someone that I wanted to toss because he was coming in off of all those routes, especially considering the stat I've always seen is that move works less than 10% of the time, and it ends up costing me in here. Second race, we had a first-time starter and a pretty open race when you dig into it, and that's how the public ended up betting it. The question I kept asking myself was, who's the pace in here? And I landed on the 3. Last time out, the first call, we can see 21 and 3/5 seconds on the turf, and then 44 and 2/5, and he was off that pace by a length already and faded the rest of the way in here. I ended up having him on top. I thought he could run away with this race early, gate to wire. Also, dropping back into maiden claiming could move him forward with that race experience. With all the questions though in here, I passed the race. We ended up seeing the 8 win it, off a pretty long layoff from the spring coming into the fall, cutting back in distance as well. And you see the drop first time into maiden claiming. Makes all the sense in the world. The horse for sure fits, but the way I handicap, I want some more confirmation before getting into a race like this. I wanted no part of, playing the guessing game, so ended up passing on this race. 8 ends up winning though at 4-1. Our 3 went off at 3-1. Not nearly enough of a price for me to want to, look to get in to even a speculative wager on the 3. So ended up passing this race. The theme today just seemed to be paceless races. This is another one where, first off, not a whole lot of pace, obviously, but secondly, you could have pretty easily tossed a favorite, I think. But starting with the early speed, the 5 is where I felt our early pace could come from. I get no form recently, but when you come all the way down here to May 4th at Churchill, 22 3/5, 45 2/5 the second call, was in first and second before getting caught in here late in deep stretch. The second call time is slow enough that most should be able to catch that in here. My issue though is that she was the only speed in this spot, and when you look at the wins from the other horses, she should be able to get there against this pace today. I understand she's been struggling, kind of trying to find her level, because after the 2 allowance races, you see drop to $50,000 claiming, showed absolutely nothing. Claimed goes back up to allowance, which that's a move everybody's going to do after a claim. But then last time out against $30,000 claimers, showed nothing. I just keep thinking this is a horse that needs to get in front. And then when we look at the win, jumping around a little bit, back down February 16th down here at Fairgrounds, 46 1/5 seconds, the second call. So that was kind of the mark I'm looking for in here to evaluate the rest of the runners on. And that's why I say everyone should be able to run to that pace that she should set at the second call. Now I mentioned the favorite, and the favorite ended up being the 8 at 3-2. I wanted to toss for a few reasons. You look at the win last time out at Ellis Park. 23 seconds flat to the first call, 47 seconds to the second call. Yes, looks slow, and is confirmed when we see the first and second call, -3 and -2. That was against $30,000 claimers. Coming back against $30,000 claimers, non-winners of 2 lifetime. First time this horse has ever ran against other winners. The other thing I think you have to add in here is the Ellis Park track. Favored speed that whole early part of the meet when they moved from Churchill. At the first call, this horse was 2.5 lengths off, made a move, and then went on to win the race. Horses 2+ lengths off were not winning down there. So that tells you how terrible the early speed in there had to be, especially for her to come from that far off and win the race. Other than that one race, which was an 81 speed figure, if you eliminate that, look at the rest of these figures. They're not very fast in here at all. And for that reason, I felt that the 3-2, well, any price lower than her 2-1 morning line was going to be a significant underlay, and that's what we ended up getting in here. Going back through, though, this is the reason why I went wide. You have to remember, we're looking 46 1/5 second for the off-the-pace runners. The 1 was a pretty quick toss for me. You can see 46 2/5 last time out. Coming from Belterra, hasn't been able to win in there. I went nothing to do with her. The 2 was an interesting one. At 3-1, ended up going off at 12-1. Coming from allowance level races I get from Prairie Meadows. But when you look down here at the wing, even though it was 5 furlongs, 46 2/5 seconds was in front the whole way. The way I was seeing it, yes, there's not a whole lot of pace in here. Being up on the pace is going to be a significant advantage. Should I have made her an early horse? Probably so. But outside of that one race, she's never been up near, the leaders at all. So I felt, she was more of a presser or a closer type, which is how I had her in here. And I felt, with the huge price we were getting on her now as a B horse, I definitely, and obviously I'm guessing you can assume, I ended up making a bet on her to win in here, dropping back for the first time into claiming territory. The 3 was a horse kind of on the outside looking in. Same sort of thought process. Last 2 races after the maiden claiming win goes to allowance, dropping into claiming after the win for the first time. The race back at Churchill on May 29th, it was a mile race, so obviously one turn. We know this race at Keeneland today is going to be about a mile regardless. You can see the second call time, 46 and 4/5 seconds in there. Made a positional move to first, drew off to win. I get the form's terrible coming into the spot, but with wanting to eliminate the 8, I wanted to have some sort of coverage on her if you're following this chart. So that's why I had her as a seahorse. And then the same sort of thing down here on the 4. Go all the way back to June 10th, the win. 46 and 3/5, even though it's a mile at Canterbury. You can see cuts into the beaten lanes and then absolutely draws off to win that race. From there, went to a stakes race and showed nothing. Allowance level, a little bit better. And then an optional claiming race back on the dirt again. You know, it's not a good race whatsoever. Finishes 5th out of 5 horses, 14 lengths off of it. The drop into the claiming makes all the sense in the world. That's where I added her in there as a C. I didn't really, want to have win bets on her, but if you're looking horizontally speaking, I think she was one that you'd want to use. Ended up going off at 5-1. The 5 we've touched on. The 6 was the other B horse. And when you eliminate her last 2 races, this pace line at Fairgrounds in the maiden win, $50,000 claimers, looks pretty good. 45 and 4/5 the second call. First call we can see sub 22 seconds, +4 and a +1. She makes a big move in here against the beaten lanes. Drives past to win the race by a length. I felt she was a threat in here, so I ended up having her as a B horse. Clearly I wasn't the only other one thinking this. She went off at 9-2 as a B horse, a little light for what I thought she should be, especially considering the 12-1 we're getting on the 2. The 7, and this is a horse that blew up the whole race. She was 23-1, 21 on the morning line. The win comes from Belterra, July 20th. Maiden special weight, $16,000 purse. I get the move in here. First to second call, draws off to win the race. I don't know how you get to this horse. I'm looking to fade these runners. She's 1 for 12 lifetime. She went to a pretty logical spot after that win. $25,000 claimers. Comes in second, then steps up in class against allowance level back at Belterra and shows absolutely nothing on the turf. Maybe she needed to get back to the dirt. I don't know. All I know is that I never would get to this horse, and especially considering not a whole lot of other people did too, with her being the second longest price on the board outside of the 1. With how easily you could sort of eliminate some of these runners, and especially the 8, I knew for sure I wanted to take advantage of the 40% of the pool that I felt had no hope in here. I put win bets on the 5 and the 2. Didn't play out like I wanted to whatsoever. I can't be too upset. We eliminated the 8, who's a false favorite, 3-2. Just wish we could have taken full advantage of that 3-2 being a significant underlay and juicing up some of the prices on everybody else. 5 first-time starters in this 4th race. Another maiden race, and it's what saved me from betting doubles into this spot after being completely wrong in the 3rd race. I'm pretty thankful for that. I had it pretty chalky with the 1 who ended up being 2-1, and then the 8 was my other A horse who was 4-1. I felt, it was being bet pretty accurately in here, and I get that the 1 goes against the rule that I think most follow with the 7 furlong races. You want to fade those rail runners. I just wasn't as sold on everyone else in here outside of her and the 8. It ended up being a pass race for me. The 7 wins this race, comes way down from that 15-1 morning line. It'd been tough for me to get to this horse. I get the blinkers went on, but when you look at the trainer stat, first time blinkers only hitting at 3%. I don't know how you could correlate that to being, the move needed in here for this horse. Clearly everybody else saw something I wasn't, coming down from 15-1 to 5-1. But it didn't matter. It ended up passing the race. with so much in question with the 5 first-time starters. Another maiden race that was pretty straightforward handicapping, and that's how it played out too. And the reason why I ended up playing was because of the odds on the 10. So first off, there isn't anyone that's going to run with the line that the 9 set last time out. 48 and 4/5 to the first call, 113 and 4/5 to the second call. You can see up on that pace all the way throughout and loses by a nose at Kentucky Downs. When we go through here, that 113 and 4/5, you're going to see how dominant it is against the rest of these runners. The 115 last time out, show nothing, quick toss. The 2, no form, 110 and 1/5 last time out to the second call, was nowhere to be found in this race at all. Another quick toss. The 3, first time going around 2 turns on the turf. You can see that race last time out was a -5 and a -7. Finishes 4th. You know, a horse that's going to come off the pace, that's what they're supposed to do against a slow pace like that. I wanted nothing to do with him either. The 4 sprinted on the turf last time. So again, first time around 2 turns. Just ran an okay race in here. Nothing too exciting to see. This is a horse that, yeah, clearly is a turf horse. But is the extra distance of just going a mile going to help him in here today? I didn't quite think so. Interesting though, went off 12-1 from that 20-1 morning line. Added as a seahorse, but a very marginal contender. And that 12-1 is not clearly enough that, you know, should warrant a win bet as a seahorse. The 5, another horse going around 2 turns for the first time, showed absolutely nothing, wanted nothing to do with the 5. The 6, no form at all, getting onto the turf for the first time, definitely up against it and probably needs to drop into a claiming ranks race to look to win, so nothing much in there that you could like. The 7 was a horse that I had the thinking as an A that his odds would float up off of that 4-1. Didn't happen at all. Went off at 5-2. I liked this last race because it was off the turf to begin with. 113 to the second call. Didn't show a whole lot, but clearly you can see over here 115 pedigree on the turf. Wanted to get on the turf. Stayed in the race when it got called off. This is a surface that he wants to run on. The question mark is just going to be how does he run on the turf, and we don't quite know yet. And at 5-2, I don't want to take the guess, wondering how he's going to run the turf. At that price, he almost, in my eyes, became an underlay, especially considering he didn't do a whole lot against that 113 second call time in the debut race. The 8, another horse going around 2 turns for the first time, didn't do anything. Quick toss. And then the 10, I said, is the reason why I wanted to play the race. Look at the pace that he's coming out of. 51 seconds to the first call, 116 and 3/5 to the second call. Didn't make a move at all, and then tries to come flying up in here late. And I think that's important to realize because you have to pass horses as an off-the-pace runner. The next part of this, is he going to get a pace to close into? Well, not really, because we only have the 9 that we know can go out front to win this race. So getting a hotter pace in here today isn't going to happen for this 10. And he ended up going off at 3-1, so taking 25% of the pull. The 11, another quick toss, going around 2 turns for the first time, did nothing on debut, want nothing to do with him. And then the 12, same thing, going around 2 turns for the first time, but you'll see at the first and second call was in first place. Yes, he set quicker fractions than what we can see the 9 will set early, but what I like is that this 9 has passed horses before. And we see that in the second race at Ellis Park. 3rd to 1st before getting necked down. So this horse can run with other pressure. So if this 12 wants to go out to the lead early, I felt the 9 would be just fine with letting that happen and running just off of him like he's shown before. Now I made a bit of a pivot off of the chart because I had the 7, 9, and 10 as the A and B horses. The 10 is a threat, but not with the pace setup that he's going to get today. And then we felt that the 7 was significantly overbet. That left us with the 9, who looked to be the best horse on paper and ended up being the best horse because he wins the race at 3-1. what I did was a pretty rare play for me, was a single win bet on the 9 at 3-1. 2-1 was much more fair on him. I think we're kind of splitting hairs when we get to that point, but 3-1, more than happy to do that. Not a single horse in here that was going to be able to beat him against that pace that he ran last time out. The only regret I could see looking back on is not going all in with a max bet. But against a maiden race, a lot of question marks. You see a lot of horses going around 2 turns for the first time. Maybe they wanted 2 turns, but regardless, singled up on the 9 in here, ended up getting the win at 3-1. Just an absolute brutal beat in here in the 6th race, especially when you go back and look at the replay. Looking at the early pace scenario, the 5's going to compromise the 1 and the 3. And the reason why is when we go back here, June 15th at Ellis Park, 21 4/5 to the first call. The 3, we can see, wants to get out front. Those are against routes, much too slow, so he's going to be a toss. And then the 4, we can see wants to sit in the 22 and 3/5, 4/5 range. We see 2 back at Ellis Park, 22 and 4/5, takes that gate to wire. The race 3 back, 21 4/5, and was only good enough to be in 4th. This horse hasn't ran against the sub 22 second first call in front and won, so I want no part to do with the 1 either. And you can see we're going 7 furlongs. Again, you can also use the same angle. You don't want that rail, even being a speed, I guess, going 7 furlongs down here at Keeneland. So I felt that the 5 was going to take out the rest of the early speed. I had the 5 as a B horse, but it didn't matter because I knew I wasn't going to bet win bets on the 5 because of how good the speed's going to be from off the pace from the 6 and the 7. So I want to take that 44 and 3/5 seconds second call that we know the 5 can run and look at the 6 and 7. And you see last time out for the 6, 45 seconds flat to the second call. Makes a huge move second call to win this race by 3 lanes. And again, even though going 6 furlongs at Churchill, 21 and 2/5 seconds, that's a +4, so it's quicker than, what's par down there. It also was the fastest pace of anyone's last race in here. 12-1 the morning line, I knew we weren't going to get that. 9-2 is what we ended up having to eat in here. And then when you look at the 7, the thing I'm looking for, as always, you hear me say it 100,000 times, horses that can pass other horses. 3 back, I get 45 and 4/5 seconds, but it came from off the pace, and we know that today, sitting in 6, it's probably going to happen, considering we know we have 3 early runners that are going to be ahead of this 7 at the first call. And you can also add in this 8, who you can see has been wanting to get up near the front of the pace early. So you're already going to have the majority of the field in front of this 7. The 7 went off at 8-1. So clearly easy Dutch bet in here for me on the 6 and 7. The winner ends up being the 2, who duels the 6 all the way down the lane. The 2 went off at 10-1. I don't know how I could ever get to this 2 on top. The pace 3 back is what we project, but only finished 3rd against that. So, it's not a winning pace that we know the 2 can compete against. And then you also see the 2 voids here in the claim, which don't look good. And then on top of that, coming in against a higher claiming price to this race. So, tough beat, brutal beat. I thought we were going to be able to get the 9-2 6 horse in there for us, but the 2 ends up beating us in here late. I try to pride myself on really not going on tilt in betting races just because of bad beats like we had in the 6, but I know for sure that's what I did in here in the 7th and got lucky with it. Maiden race, 5 of them are going a route for the first time. The 4 is our early runner in here, and you see the E1 and E2 figures of a 93 and 89. The only other early runner in here is going to be the 11, and you can see just not even close to what the 4 can run. Now the 4 is going a route for the first time, which raises some questions of, can he get the distance? Is it going to stack up for him? I had him as an A because I felt that the early speed that he possesses is going to be that dominant against a field that wants to come from off of it. And at 12-1, I think that's more than fair, to ask from an early runner. Didn't get it. 4-1 is what his price landed on. Now, the next part of this is I was looking for horses again. Who can pass? Who's ran good races? That whole same sort of handicapping process. And the 3 was the other A horse for that reason. 7-2 is what we got on him. And he wins this race. But you can see the last 2 races he's had. Sat in third, first and second call in his first race. Held position, held beaten lanes. Made an effort in the stretch before losing and staying in third in there. Then last time out at Kentucky Downs, makes a huge move from 10th all the way up here to second. He was bumped at the start. He's been taking money. He's a very logical horse in here, clearly, and that's why I had him as an A horse. The 5, going around 2 turns for the first time. I like this middle move in here into the beaten lanes a little bit before fading. Again, does the distance help him? I don't know. But a horse coming from Kentucky Downs and Saratoga that's ran competitive, I want to have a piece of, especially horizontally speaking. 15-1 is what he ended up going off at. The 6, Quick Toss, has shown nothing in the only sprint here at Churchill Downs. Nothing to do with him. The 7 I had as a seahorse, and it's because, again, he's coming from Kentucky Downs, sprinting past half the field, finishes in 5th. It's a good race within a bad race. I mean, he beats 7 other runners in here, so you have to give him respect for that reason. Shockingly goes off at 43-1, so very cold on the board, but, a marginal contender at most outside looking in. And then the other seahorse I had was the 8. Was 6-1, and you can see 3 straight second place runnings, 113 and 2/5 at the second call in his last race. It's just going to be a matter of if he can handle the turf, and you can see he can. In the debut race at Ellis Park on July 14th, was on the turf, not super quick fractions, and finishes his best race to date, second by a head. I don't think he's a big threat in here, but 6-1 was way too short for a horse that I felt, again, was on the outside looking in this race. The 10's a pretty quick toss for me. Last time out against a slow first and second call, only gets up to 4th. He should win that race. Any pace he gets in here today is going to be too much for him to handle. And we know the Colonial second call times 112 and 4/5, not nearly quick at all. We've learned that from the first couple days of handicapping on the turf here. And then the 12, I get why he was favored, and when I look back at it now, I probably should have just eliminated him completely from contention and not had him as a B horse, because then it makes me that much more confident on the 3 and 4, which are the horses I ended up betting. He goes off as the 9-5 favorite. The issue is that there's way too many in here that could improve in this race, and when you evaluate his Kentucky Downs debut race, he had a perfect post. He got all of the pace he needed to run into. It just comes down to that 9-5 is just way too short for a horse that looked to have it his way last time out. And again, too many can improve in here, and to take that price, I think, is way too low for anyone. So it was a speculative wager for me on the 3 and 4, and that's how it actually finishes. 3 beats the 4 in here. So, not a full unit play, but one that I'm happy I ended up having after the bad beat last race. I think in hindsight, probably shouldn't have bet it, but I get the benefit of the doubt in here. Maybe a little bit of, I don't know, you can call it gambler's luck, whatever you want to say. Maybe I was owed a win after how bad that beat was last time out. And again, no horizontal wagers in here with tossing the 12 since it was a speculative wager. I had this 8th race as a predictive race instead of a chalky race. And the reason why is because I felt there's really only 2 true contenders to win in here, and that's the favorite and the 5th choice on the warning line. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th choices all had holes in them. Beginning with the early speed, the line I used was the 8's 2 back, 22 seconds flat, 44 and 3/5 the second call. Took that race gate to wire, with a huge margin at Hawthorne. Now, more importantly, focusing in on this first call of 22 seconds flat, you'll see that's going to take out the 4 who can't get there and the 1 as well. We can see 2 back at Ellis Park, 22 seconds flat to the first call, 44 and 4/5 in there to the second call, but did not win that race. We know the 8 can win against those fractions. Regardless, though, I want to toss the 1 in here as well because pressured early, and we'll see even in that third race, pressured at the first call and still didn't win in there. So this horse needs to be out ahead by open lanes to win. Not going to happen in here today. This isn't a crazy get with the 7, even money on the morning line. Looking at the last race, you see just how dominant that win was. 21 and 4/5 to the first call, 44 and 1/5 to the second call. Took that race gate to wire. Now, you're probably thinking, this is another early horse. Well, to me, what you need to do is look at the maiden win. She comes from third off the pace to get up here and win. And you can see in the race 3 back, made a move in here beating lengthwise, but didn't win the race. And that was going a route at Ellis Park. Regardless, this horse towers the rest of the field in here because of how she can handle that second call time quicker than what we project today. As far as the 2, the reason why I'm on the 2 is because of the race 3 back. 21 and 3/5 to the first call, 44 and 1/5 to the second call. Comes from dead last, storms up to win this race. She's going to be dead last in this race again today. As you can see, she's the only closer in the field. Easy 2-horse Dutch bet with these odds, considering the 2 who was hired before but went off at 6-1. The 7 goes off at 4-5. It was an 80-20 split between the 7 and the 2. Got the short end of the stick odds-wise, considering this really isn't a 50% plus ROI play. So this is one time where the odds hurt me, but regardless, I'm happy I made that wager because these are races that just build your bankroll forward and kind of the bread and butter for 2-horse Dutch bettors, because if not, I pass this race. The 7 is that dominant in here. I guess on the flip side, if you want to say you single up on this 7, you could, but I don't think many of us are going to want to eat 4 to 5 favorites with single win bets, especially considering we narrowed this race down to the 2 best runners. This 9th race was one of those where I think the execution was right on all levels of handicapping and betting for how I go about things. Just didn't end up finishing that way. The 1's going to be our early runner in here, and also the 3-1 favorite. I wanted to fade coming in off the maiden win, and I wanted to demand a price too, because as a favorite, he has to attack, winners for the first time in his career. That's why he ended up being a B horse. I felt he was the early speed in here and possibly able to take this field gate to wire. So when we see in here 112 and 1/5 seconds to the second call, that was him in first by a head last time out at Kentucky Downs and drew off a little bit to win that race. As far as my A horses, the 3 was trending forward off of his last race. And when you look in here, the pace 2 races back is pretty much what we're projecting in here today. He ran a competitive race against that. I loved the last race because of how quick these early fractions were. And he was able to make a positional and beaten lengths move into it before fading late, dropping back from a stakes race into allowance level company. So I felt that the race last time out could move him forward, and especially considering the pace should be a little bit slower in here today. I think looking at it now, though, you can see he needs to be up on the pace to win, and that's going to be an issue considering we have the presence of a couple other early runners in here, so probably a pretty bad choice on my end as an A horse. His price ended up being 9-2, and then the 7, I'd say he's on the outside looking in, but I felt he had a lot of upside value at that 15-1. Ended up going off just over it at 16-1. But getting back to the turf, got him in form last time out. That sort of opened me up to look at the rest of his races on the turf early in his career. And when you look at his maiden win in here at Kentucky Downs, 110 2/5 seconds, lots of a ton of beaten lanes in here, but ends up firing from that second call to win that race. Then you look at where he went the next time out. It was here at Keeneland, same class level as today, the allowance race, and runs a good race within a bad race in there. He still beat 8 other horses in there, even though he finished 5 lengths off of it. Then he went to Turfway Park, and that wasn't his thing. And then the Ellis Park race was taken off the turf, not his thing at all. And then again, last time out at Churchill, got back onto the turf here and runs a good race. So again, he's getting back to what he wants to do. 16-1 was more than fair to me in here. The issue is that the horse that I tossed off the rip was the 4, because he's not as fast early as the 1 horse. He wins the race at 4-1. To me, that's a severe underlay, especially in a spot where he has to win from the front. And, you see other horses in the program that are quicker than him, and it's confirmed. So, again, like I said, I think the execution was right on my end as far as handicapping and betting. I ended up betting the 3 and the 7, both my A horses. In hindsight, I guess I probably need to take a step back and say the betting wasn't properly executed, considering when we look at this 3, he needs to be more forward to run a winning race. And there's the presence of too many early horses in here that will take him out of his game. But regardless, I should be able to fall back on this 7, who just didn't quite have it coming out of the turn to win the race. So ended up losing it in here. And, races like this happen. I don't know how this horse goes from 12-1 the morning line to 4-1. Clearly the money's right in here. They absolutely hammered him against this field and got what I think is an underlay winner. And then to close things out on this Thursday is a maiden claiming race that I actually did get involved in. 2 first-time starters, and not a whole lot of early pace in here. But what I did was use the 6's line last time out from Churchill Downs to evaluate everyone else in here today. That was the best line and most competitive race that I saw in here. But you're going to quickly see that I didn't really have to go that far to start eliminating runners. You see the 1 right off the bat, can't win at this level at all, in for 50,000 again today, quick toss. The 2 comes in with absolutely no form, another quick toss. The 3 is a first-time starter, taking no money from the public. I want nothing to do with her. The 4, same thing. No form, not as fast as the 6's line at all in its best race, which was all the way back last year at Churchill Downs, going 7 furlongs. Easy toss as well. The 5, same thing as the 1. Can't win against this level. Actually moving up in maiden claiming price. Not a whole lot of form coming in either. Another toss. The 6 we know we have as a B. The 7 getting back to dirt should help. But she's a lifelong loser and not ever close until recent in here. So why is she going back to the dirt when she's ran her 2 best races on the turf? I don't quite understand that. Actually went off at 7-2, and I thought a lot of dead money in this pool. The 8 continues a trend with no form. The drop should help her first time, but I think she's still that far off against these horses. And then the 9 is dropping in class again, but I think it's safe to say she's not a turf horse whatsoever. Dirt's going to be an upgrade for her in this race. Actually was an 8-5 favorite. Ended up being 3-1 when things closed. And then the 10 was the other first time starter and ended up going off as the 8-5 favorite. So now there's only 3 horses I want in here. And what I did was I just played the odds. I had the 9 and the 6, who was 10-1 when things closed, as my 2 bets. Now, if the 6 was bet more by the public, I probably passed this race. But 3-1 and 10-1 was why I had to get involved. A speculative wager again, not a full unit play. But I think more importantly, you see I had the 10 as an A horse. I understand that, some people are so strict and it's, you must bet them because they're your A horse. And if I went by that logic, even with my own betting style, I would have bet the 10 and the 6. The 9 would have been my toss. because then you're just picking the highest of the two odds horses of who you have remaining. Like, I didn't want to do that. I think it's a first time starter going off 8 to 5. Allow yourself to pivot from what you initially handicapped the race as if the odds push you there. And that's what I ended up doing in this race and got a nice win home to close out the day with the 9 horse at 3 to 1.